Hey everybody, welcome to Loudon Agile Network for our June meetup. I am very happy to say that today I saw that Loudon Agile Network has hit 1900 members, exactly 1900. So that is very uplifting. We just started 4 years ago, and in 4 years we have built a pretty large community, and we host events every month. So we're so happy that you could join us today. And we're very happy to welcome back our supporter and friend, Alan Zucker, who is a prominent project management, program management, agile leadership guru in the Washington, D.C. area. And he has spent more than 25 years working for Fortune 100 companies. I personally have learned a lot from Alan when I worked with him many years ago. And it's remarkable to see that Alan is always spreading the wealth of his knowledge in different meetups. He also conducts a lot of training through his company, which I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about in the event today. So today's topic is Milestone-Kanban, a hybrid scheduling technique. So a lot of people are afraid to use the word hybrid, but the reality is that in many organizations, agile and traditional ways of working um, are work in a very integrated manner, and it works pretty good actually. There was some phobia and allergy to that word a couple of years ago, and I will admit that I was one of those people, but I've actually seen it work really well. And Alan is such a guru in project and program management as well as agile. He's going to share with us a lot of insights and tricks that is going to help us to use this amazing tool called Kanban for milestone planning. So without further ado, let's please welcome our speaker for this evening, Alan Zucker.
Thank you, Toby. You're so kind. Toby and I worked together years ago, and he was truly the Agile guru when we were together. So it's such a compliment for him to be talking to me that way. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the milestone Kanban. This is a scheduling technique that I'm going to say I invented. It's really something that I described, and I described it a little bit first about a little bit over a year ago when I was working with a renewable energy client. And in fact, earlier today, I used a little bit of a modification of this process to help actually the communications and marketing team at Northern Virginia Community College, where I'm also an instructor, to help them really think about a way to manage their work more effectively. So lots of extensions. So we're all, most of us were raised with our traditional project schedule, or Microsoft Project, or whatever tool you want. And when we think about traditional scheduling, it's based on a lot of really strong assumptions, that the scope is clear, that we're not going to have changes, that we know all of our deliverables, and that we have a comprehensive WBS, the idea that if it's not in the WBS, it's not going to get delivered. That we know our dependencies, we can map them, and that those dependencies are fairly accurate and really describe how our projects are executed. And also, very importantly, that we can accurately estimate our project durations. So, all of us have managed projects, and we all know that none of those underlying assumptions really are effective. So I developed this scheduling technique, and it's really optimized for knowledge work projects, although I think it has a lot of other potential applications. So it's really designed for where the milestones or when the major deliverables are known. And quite often when we're putting together our project schedules, we know what those key dates are, or roughly what those key dates are, give or take a week or maybe even a month. But we really don't know the activities. And when we think about doing knowledge work, when we're writing software, writing requirements, or putting together a plan, we know the high level requirements, but what are all the exact steps? How long is it going to take? How long is it going to take to get a project or get a document approved? The dependencies aren't rigid. We have a lot of flexibility about our ability to move things around. Collaboration with the team is critical. And also when we think about accountability, that we really can drive accountability through transparency. Also, as I go through, if you have questions, small enough group, either just raise your hand and ask, or just when I take a pause at the end of a slide, just let me know. So when we think about the technique that I've articulated, I've come up with a fairly straightforward 5-step process. The first part, we're going to define our deliverables and define our project scope. And this is really, to a large extent, leveraging some of the best practices from traditional project management. We'll collect requirements, we'll define the scope, and then we'll go through a process of decomposing it. Then we're going to create a roadmap. And so the difference between a roadmap and a traditional schedule is it's really meant to be high level, clear placeholder dates of when things are going to be due. Then we'll start managing the work by a Kanban. So we'll build our Kanban boards. We'll think about the activities, create the boards. Then we'll use our very agile steps, our agile practices for monitoring our progress. We'll do daily stand-ups and our meet afters. And then we will use iterative planning techniques. That's the 5-step process we're going to walk through tonight. So step 1, we're going to define our deliverables. Define the scope. Defining our project scope is it's a holdover from our traditional projects that I think still makes a lot of sense. So when we talk about our scope, definition, unambiguously describing what we're going to deliver on the project. And so when I talk about deliverables, and one of the things that I always run into, particularly when I'm teaching, is that when we are talking to folks about deliverables, they jump immediately, or project scope, I should say, they immediately jump into, well, what are the activities? And I've become a big fan of really forcing people to think about what are the things that we need to deliver? And let's define our deliverables first before we jump into defining the activities. Because what we find is we've got our project teams being really, really busy, but what we're trying to get to is not as clear. So we talk about our scope. I also talk about defining both what's in scope as well as what's out of scope. And that helps us define the border conditions and helps create that important conversation that we need to have with our stakeholders up front to prevent misunderstandings. It might be that as part of the project, we need to develop training materials, but maybe we're not going to deliver the training. Or maybe that, and in fact, I was using this example today when I was working with the communications team at Nova. It's like, you're going to create the signage for graduation, but you're not responsible for delivering it. And that's just a way of creating clarity around expectations. So we can use, a WBS or WBS-like process to decompose the scope. The formal definition of our WBS, the hierarchical decomposition of the work. And really the goal here is so that we can define what we need to do. And we can also put some change control, the appropriate level of change control around changes to our project scope. And that also creates that transparency. Any questions so far? So next we're going to create a roadmap. Roadmaps, a visual time phase view of what needs to be delivered on our projects. We can use time periods on our roadmaps, or the columns in our roadmaps, based on what our needs are for progressive elaboration, or based on what we know. We can also make our roadmaps, we can get a little bit creative with our roadmaps. We can use different colored cards or stickers or built-in swim lanes. So when we think of a sample roadmap, we can look at things, break down the first quarter by month, then go by quarters, and then maybe by years. And this allows us to use the appropriate time period to meet our needs. Things that are going to be, 2 quarters away, probably don't have a lot of clarity exactly when that needs to be done. Things that are due next month, probably so. So we can lay out when our deliverables are due, and maybe one of those major milestones. And then we can get fancy. We can use different color cards, either represent different teams, or we can use them to represent different products. We can use our swim lanes to represent products or teams. We can use our red string, which we all love from our, for those of us that know SAFe, on our PI planning boards, and as a way of connecting and showing those interdependencies. If we want to go with a low rent version, we can use Microsoft Planner as a way of depicting some of this information. And I use Planner not because I'm really that enamored with the tool, but a lot of people want to use some kind of tool to track this. And I'm a big fan of just doing it on the wall. But it's a tool that works, and it comes bundled with Office, and pretty much everybody uses Office these days. So we can create our columns, which would be our time periods, and our cards, that would be those major deliverables and milestones. So when we think about the milestones and the deliverables, what would be some of the information we want to pick up? Obviously, what's the name? Who owns it? And it's really critical that we define owners for our deliverables and milestones. Who's that person we're going to hold accountable? When's it due? And as we progressively refine it, maybe we'll update that. Also, let's define what our dependencies are. We can define them up front, as well as our acceptance criteria. And I'm also a big fan of defining acceptance criteria up front. It helps us, when we're doing our development, it provides clarity there. It also helps ensure that we're building exactly what our customers or our clients are looking for. Any questions so far? Comments? Next, we're going to build our Kanban, and probably most of the people in this call, since it's a lean agile meetup, know about the Kanban. And Kanban is, it's a set of practices and principles to help us manage the flow of our work. One of the things that I really like about Kanban is that it's visual, and through, because it's visual, it's up on the wall, or it's in a mural board, or somewhere we're all looking at it. It creates transparency, and also promotes accountability and collaboration. If it's up on the wall, people are going to be looking. It's like, hey, what's going on with that activity or that deliverable? Why is it seemingly stuck? And it also creates that opportunity for people to work together. Hey, I see it seems like you're really backed up with some work. I'm a little bit late today. Can I help you out? So then we're going to define the activity. So we can look at our work packages from our WBS, and then think about, well, what are the activities required to create them? Most Agile coaches like to go small. And so I would, I recommend very, small item. I recommend items that are certainly less than a week. And the reason we like to go small is that smaller items go through the process more quickly. It also provides greater visibility and transparency to things that are not getting done. As we're defining our activities, we also want to be mindful about dependencies on future or for future deliverables. If we know something's coming up in a month, we need to start planning for some of those things now. So let's build that in as we're defining our activities. So we can think about our deliverables and the activities associated with them. Activity information, what's the activity? Again, who owns it? Who's that accountable person? When's it due? And here it's also helpful to start collecting metrics. When did we start working on it? When did we finish working on it? And we can start, capturing that information to get a better idea of how long is it going to actually take us to get things done. If there's any deliverables, we can also list them out here. And then we can start building our Kanban board. And, Kanban boards, as we all know, the columns represent the various process steps. And our most basic board, 3 columns. Backlog, what's the work that's coming up? We want to prioritize that by what's most important. The doing, the items that we're working on, and done. I also like to make sure that we're defining our definition of ready and definition of done. So what does it mean that we're ready to start working on something? What are those entry conditions or preconditions? And then let's define the exit criteria, the definition of done. One of the reasons I'm a huge fan of defining our definitions of ready, definitions of done, is it helps us build quality into our products or our services, whatever we're delivering. The cost of rework increases exponentially from the source. So the sooner we find those problems, the better, the cheaper, the lower the cost of rework. So a very simple example, building a Kanban board for a presentation, backlog, what are the sections, draft, review, done. And then we've got our definitions of ready, and we also have our quality conditions, our definitions of done for each of those various process steps. Could also use a similar process, project where we're looking at doing data analysis. As I said, this is really optimized for knowledge work, where we really can't predict those durations very well. Again, going back to planner, simple Kanban board, backlog, doing, done. And then, out of planner, we've got, most of the basic elements that we'd want to pick up or we'd want to use. If we want to mature our process, we can refine our columns. Our doing columns are a very broad column. Maybe we start breaking it down into the process steps, like we showed here with our reports or our data analysis. We can reduce, we want to limit the simultaneous projects. We want to use our WIP limits, in other words. And that reduces multitasking. And the estimates that I've read is that multitasking, working on too many projects or too many activities at once, decreases our productivity and takes anywhere from 20 to 40%. And I've actually seen estimates as high as 80% in terms of the reduction of productivity. Also improves the quality of our work. We also want to create flow. We want to create pull and create flow. We only want to start something new when our team has capacity to begin it. And that helps us limit that multitasking. It also helps us focus on finishing. One of the things that I've observed in a lot of organizations is that we tend to focus a lot, we tend to start a lot of work, but we're less fixated on finishing it. We also want to continue to refine our definitions of ready and done, helping to set expectations and reduce the rework. As we're going through, we want to make our work packages small. Smaller the work, more quickly it goes through the system. I recommend things that can be done in 2 to 3 days at the very most. And we also want to lean out the process. So many of us, particularly if we're working in large enterprise environments, there's just a lot of things that we do that are unnecessary. One of the big things that I like to focus on or complain about is approvals, or we've got to enter all this information in duplicative systems, or we've got documentation just for documentation's sake. So what can we do? What are the things that we can do to make the process simpler? Okay. Any questions about building our Kanban? Then we want to monitor our progress. And so here we're going to borrow and steal some of the great practices out of Agile. We'll have our daily stand-up meeting. And we'll talk about our daily stand-up 15-minute time box meeting. And the reason we have the daily stand-up is to create transparency into what's going on. create collaboration, a collaborative environment across our team, and also to identify and address issues quickly. So we're all familiar with the daily stand-up process. What have we finished since the last meeting? So we can manage our handoffs. What's the upcoming work? So we can coordinate on our priorities, have the priority shifted, and also identifying the issues or the blockers. So we're going to do our daily stand-up in front of our Kanban board. There's our various activities. So we completed A13, moving from the doing to the done column. We identified an issue. We're going to just mark it, and we'll deal with that during our meet after. Since we finished A13, we can now pull an item into our doing column at 2.4. And then we have something new, that's something unplanned work that we can then bring in. And so we've added that last item. And so for those of you familiar with Agile, with Kanban boards, just leveraging the same practices that we always do. The meet after, and I think a lot of people do meet afters. It's one of the practices they particularly talk about in SAFe. And this is where for the issues that we've identified in our daily stand-up, people that have issues or can contribute to the solution, they stay after. The rest of the team goes back to do work. So it increases the team's productivity. So we'll arrange the items the issues from the daily stand-up, from the items that have the greatest number of overlaps in terms of people that are impacted to the least, and we'll just work our way down the list. And if your items are finished, you can go back to work. There's no need for you to hang out. We can then use our roadmap as a way of reporting status and creating visibility there, transparency there. So we've got our, here, we've just taken our roadmap and we're just adding, colored dots. Our RAG indicators are red, amber, green, our blue for our done. And, you can imagine walking into a room, if you're doing this physically, you got everything there. Management can see where things are, can see where we've got problems. We can also see our accomplishments. Any questions?
Hey, hi there. This is Morley. Are these the features that you're showing on the roadmap?
These could be features. It could be, this is meant to be a generic or an extensible process. So here I'm using deliverables and milestones. You could call, if you're using this in a more agile context, you could put out epics and features at this level. Does that make sense, Morali? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. And then the last step is planning iteratively. And so iterative planning, the idea that we can progressively update our project schedules or our plans. And this is a nice way to accommodate uncertainty and change and risk. It also lets us make decisions at the last responsible moment. We don't have to make all the big decisions up front. And it also allows us to get started on work before everything's known. So a pattern that we might use is that each week we're going to plan out the next 2 to 4 weeks, decomposing the work, checking to make sure that the things that are coming up in the upcoming week are, have their definitions of ready have been met. Also, as we're planning out, looking forward to make sure that we're covering our dependencies of future work. And then when we're thinking about our milestones, maybe we look, each month we look 1 to 3 months in advance. Again, breaking down things, making sure that our priorities are straight, understanding the work that's coming up. And as I mentioned that, or as I think Toby may have mentioned at the beginning of the call, I've been writing articles, blogs on project management now. I'm actually getting ready to celebrate my 10th year, so it's 120 blogs. And here are some articles that I've written, and these are on my website, pmsessentials.us, that you could use as reference. And I made it through a lot of slides more quickly than I expected and got a lot fewer questions. Harsh, did you have a question, comment? Okay. So I've made it through, but you're all Agilists. I've presented this. I've really started working with folks that are not on Agile projects, that are doing a lot of traditional work and really trying to
Hello, sir.
Let me mute. Yeah.
I just muted
Perfect.
them.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, I'm really, this is an elite community here. So what do you all think? Does this make sense? Is this something that you could see implementing in your organizations, particularly if you're not in a super strong Agile environment? What would you recommend? What are the holes that you see, or the areas that need more clarification?
Yeah, dependencies and risk items.
Give me two more sentences about those. Luis, can you
Yes.
say a little bit more about dependencies and risk?
Yeah, how do you include those things into this planning activities or this methodology?
So the dependencies, my thought there is that, at a high level, you can include the dependencies by articulating them, there, or actually, as we were talking about, trying to go back there, when we're talking about our activities or our deliverables, talking about the dependencies there as well as in the activities, visually depicting them, on our roadmap, with strings similar to what we do with our program boards in SAFe. And then risks. That's a good one. I mean, risks we can manage, similar. We could either do a heavyweight kind of thing, like we do on our traditional projects with a risk register, or maybe even adopting a more lighter weight version, like roaming the risks, like we do on our SAFe projects.
So now, nowadays, many organizations go with the OKR concepts, objectives and the key results activities, right? So I was just thinking, how can we fit those things into this mix?
So I think we could, so the OKRs is, the OKRs would be a level above this. So our objectives and our key results would be ways of defining those strategic themes. And then those strategic themes, as it cascades down, would cascade down through the projects and the deliverables that we're showing here. But that's that. I hadn't thought of going up that high, but that's an interesting thought.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take some notes as we go through. Other thoughts, comments?
So
Yeah.
Alex, this is applicable more for hybrid kind of programs.
Yes.
Okay.
Or even groups that are, I think it works well for, it's not going to work. It's not designed to replace a highly mature Agile Scrum team that's already using Kanban and is working great. I really see the primary focus for this, people that are executing projects, maybe tech projects, maybe non-tech projects, where using a Gantt chart never worked very well, where going just straight to using a Kanban board where we're working out our features and stories probably doesn't make sense. Although the idea of using a roadmap on top of that for an Agile team, is something that we talk about in SAFe. It's not, it's not specifically described in the the Scrum guide, but it's really just a lighter weight version of what we do with our our program board in SAFe, which was the inspiration for this.
Thank you.
And the status, is it using a separate tool, or you just had these columns in a PowerPoint or some other?
Well, what I was thinking is that, we can just, as we're doing as we're updating the program board or the roadmap on a probably weekly, maybe daily basis, we can just slap, sticky, colored dots on top in the corner to indicate how those what's going on with those major deliverables. So it's really meant to be a lightweight visual process.
So I've got a question. You mentioned that you've done this presentation with more traditional project managers before, maybe not necessarily Agilists. Where have you seen the most resistance in this approach, and how have you coached them through that?
So it's actually really interesting. So today, literally this afternoon, I presented a slightly modified version of this to the marketing and communications team at the local community college. And they seem to really grasp it much more quickly and easily than I expected. And really the place where I got a little bit of pushback was, when I was talking about, how to build a Kanban board. And they're like, well, we're sort of snowflakes, and, we don't want to necessarily just, define everything so clearly and upfront and have our definitions of done and our definitions of ready. But I think it was just that, as I talked it through with them, I think really a lot of the concern was, they're not used to putting things out in this level of transparency. That the work that that they kept things, in their head or on Post-it notes, or they may have been in a situation where they told a client that they would finish the deliverable that would take 3 weeks to do something. They'd get it done in 2 weeks, but they didn't want to deliver it until the 3rd week because they didn't want to set the expectation that they could get things done more quickly. And so we talked about how do we potentially accommodate those things. I actually got a lot less pushback than I expected. I also presented this to a group. It was a renewable energy company, and for the team, it was for the team that was sort of doing a lot of the pre-construction work. And it seemed to work very well there because, particularly as you're going through the process of, permitting and planning and doing community meetings, when we talk about that roadmap view of where we've got a lot of uncertainty about what, when things are going to I'm trying to get, they know when things need to occur roughly, but those are not deterministic from a timeline perspective. So they were all like, well, we were all using Microsoft Project, or that, some of them had used Primavera in the past, and they seemed to like this. And, the idea of then breaking down the, deliverables and activities and tracking that also seemed to, give them a greater level of discipline than they otherwise would have.
Okay, cool.
Harsh, did you have a question or comment?
Oh, sorry. I mistakenly unmuted myself.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm looking for my Agile pros to tell me, like, Alan, this, you got an ugly baby here. So if I got an ugly baby, let me know.
Alan, this is Shelley. I have an idea or something that I missed. Can I share?
Please.
Okay, so the step before this. So this is brilliant, but I work with a lot of folks that have so much work, right, and so many balls in the air. I think just touching on where these deliverables and milestones came from in the first place. So if maybe brain dump or brainstorm of here's all of our stuff, let's group it.
So I would go back there, really using something similar to our, what we do on our traditional projects, which is starting with, and I hate using the word WBS because it makes so many of us like get the willies, but let's think about our project and start decomposing that into the deliverables. The things that are known, and then really it's where do those deliverables potentially fall out from a timeline perspective at a very, sort of a high level. And a lot of times we basically know when things need to be done based on the fact that we typically back into our dates regardless.
Yeah, thank you. This slide brought it back to me. This is perfect.
Okay.
So just to clarify and confirm, can we say that it's a good mix of ITIL when it comes to individually manage the specific lane with the WBS defined versus the overall program is managed at the Agile level for every Kanban defined within it?
Can you re-ask that question, Harsh? You threw me for ITIL for a second because it's been a long time since I got my ITIL certification.
Yeah, so I saw the slide which you were sharing had a WBS defined, right? Where you define all the deliverables.
Mm-hmm.
And that's typically we do in the classical ITIL where we define the project. I'm coming from SAP world, right? So that's how we define the capital projects in the project systems with the work breakdown structures and the networks and milestones confirmations happens on those operations which define within the network. So I consider that as a ITIL. It's a classic project management what we do over there.
Right.
And that's what I can see. That's how you define your deliverables here. All right. But then this is for the individual lane within the overall Agile program, what you are trying to manage, where the same thing is applicable to every individual lane. So what I'm saying, it's a good hybrid example of both Agile and ITIL within every, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really all I'm doing is I'm taking, the structure and the discipline of our traditional approach, as in your terms, the ITIL approach of, defining our scope, creating a WBS, defining our scope, creating the WBS, but then rather than going into the Gantt chart, which is what we typically do, is that we then sort of go to more of an agile scheduling view. First, building our roadmap, and then building a Kanban board to manage that flow of work.
Yep, that's exactly, because I learned the Toyota manufacturing system, and that's what has been followed. I think because the Kanban overall process we are adopting from Toyota manufacturing systems coming from the shop floor world, and that's what we do within every production line where we define the milestones of producing that particular product, as you were showing on the other slide, product 1, 2, and 3. The last slide we were on, and that's exactly is the right replica of that concept of lean planning of the operations, for every product which you are trying to produce, and then monitor at the monthly or in the production world, it is not at this interval, but yeah, I understood because I also manage the continuous improvements for the rice-feed objects where we used to do the same thing as you are showing here, where you plan, forecast, budget, and plan for the whole year, break it down in the quarter, and then manage your deliverable at the monthly release cycle. So I think this is what happens, and that's what is a good way of reporting, because that's where you are indirectly showing the value map to the client, in terms of what's the return of their dollar spent on each one of the product, with respect to the resources time spent. Yeah.
Does it make sense to show any sort of a mitigation plan for the stuff that's delayed, either a reason or I don't know, maybe like a dash line to show where the mitigation would be, like when it might be delivered or something?
That would be I think that would be a really nice extension. Like if you, I like that idea. Like, so if this milestone moved out here, sort of figuring out a way of visibly or, visually depicting that something has shifted. That would be a nice, that'd be a nice addition. And it could, as we go to the, as we go to this board, we could either do it with our RAG indicator dots on the deliverables, or, where we're showing the dates on the cards, what was the original date and the new estimated date.
Yeah, because I would think that, like, if this is what I came up with at a PI planning, and I'm going to get so many questions. When is this going to be done? What is your mitigation plan? Where are we at? It's just going to generate so many questions. So if you can mitigate that on the chart somehow, it'd probably be good, because otherwise you're just going to wind up having to answer them.
And I'm thinking, so when you're doing a mitigation plan, how do you currently depict that?
Well, okay, so if we're talking about a roadmap at a PI planning, it's a roadmap, right? So in my experience, you're not showing things that we know are delayed.
Right.
We're showing like a plan, but this is beyond a roadmap, because this is a roadmap where it's already in play. A roadmap to me is something in the future, not something that's current. So this is showing things that are where you currently are.
It's both. I mean, because as you're doing your planning here, if we just go back when we're doing our plan originally, that's our roadmap. This is what the roadmap is, but then we can begin to, as we begin to execute, we can then enhance that view by adding our status reporting as an overlay. So it's a little bit of, so then becomes a little bit of both.
Yeah, on a roadmap, typically I'm not going to show like where we're currently at. That I might show that, you're going to show that some other way, but not on a roadmap. A roadmap would always be the future.
Yeah.
So if it was delayed, you wouldn't show it as delayed on the roadmap. You would just show that would be the new plan. So it would always be future oriented. But yeah, you should have some slides that say, okay, yeah, we had planned this one, but we missed that one, but that's not going to be on a roadmap.
Yeah.
And you could see the reason why, because when I see this on the roadmap, it's going to generate so many questions.
Well, I can imagine, and really what I was visualizing here, and I really appreciate your comments, because it's really making me think about things differently, is, I'm working in maybe not as mature of a project environment as the one that you're describing, but we're working with a team. They've created this roadmap. It's up on one wall in the room. And then as they're executing, as a lightweight way of dealing with it. They're just, color coding the things that have been done. And, here I'm, just assuming, for example, we're in month 2 based on the color coding. So month 1, we finished 2 of the deliverables, and then we have this one deliverable that's been delayed. And then
Yeah, and I think this is very helpful.
Mhm.
I've never seen it done this way, but I feel like you're giving me half. Like, if you're going to do it this way, if I'm especially a senior level manager, my next question is, okay, so when is it going to be done?
Right.
That's the way that I would look at this. And what this is showing me is that we're late, but I don't know when it's going to be done, or at least what the plan is for it to be done.
Okay. So, like, for example, we're looking, maybe it would be helpful to, like, we know we're in month 2, we could have the date there at the top of the column or the month name, but we've got this, this deliverable down here that we put the red dot on. But how do we now communicate when we think that deliverable is going to be completed?
Yeah, maybe with a dash line, but here's the other thing. There's also the dependencies on that, because once you dash the line as to where you want that to be completed, now you have to look at the entire rest of the board on how is that going to affect the rest of the board. So now you may have to also add dashed lines to things that, like, maybe you didn't get into month 3, but if, let's say, one of those dependencies goes into month 2, now you may have to move month 3 to quarter 2. So there's a lot of, that's why I'm saying this could get pretty complicated, basically. And I guess the way I look at it is this, to break it down, is you never go to a manager with a question without presenting them with a minimum of 3 solutions, and then they pick the solutions. Normally you know what the solution is, but you let them pick the solution. And when you show me this without showing me, okay, what is the mitigation plan? As a manager, I mean, I'm going to ask you those questions anyway, so you better have an answer to that.
Yeah. No, you raise a good point. And this, that scenario that you paint, I hadn't really fully thought that piece through. So I really appreciate that feedback.
Yep.
Harsh?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something in context of the same discussion what we were having. What we are doing recently on one of our data migration project is we have the Miro board where we check all the dependencies. So it's a very complex match of the network diagram. But then each one of those objects, which is going to carry out the data migration, is scheduled on internal IT team, what we call Miro board, where we know, just like as you shown before, of what's to be done, doing, and done. And then what are those done are ready for validations from the customer. And that's something we use as an input on the subsequent Miro board, which we go and present to the customer so they know that what they are doing and what should be done, what are the due dates. And then each one of the object we can track on among the different business units, which one of those are already done versus which one of the other business units are still working on it. So I think it's helping out us. And I know the timelines are not in the months and the quarters there, because it's more of a daily stand-up, which we are monitoring at a weekly level. And overall migrations has to finish within the month. And how to squeeze that on every subsequent mock 1 to mock and trial for the cut and the go live, right? So we are already doing that. But I think if you manage that way, it's a kind of a breaking down on the complex thing into 3 different ways of having one Miro board and then 2 other Miro boards. So that's helping us. Yeah.
Yeah, and it might, your timeline may be a different timeline here. It might be that your timeline might be the higher level things that you're looking at, and then managing the specific activities, in a Kanban, which will have either through columns or other things.
Yep.
I think another good thing is, I think you had mentioned it before, so you start with this one showing that you're gonna have delays, and then it's almost like you add a slide on top of the slide, like an overlapping slide almost, where so step by step you show the mitigations until you get to the final version. So I don't know, you may have two, you may have as many as 5 or 6 until you get to the final slide with maybe a bunch of dashed lines on it. But you go step by step, and this way each step you can explain to the managers what you're doing, to, you know, so that they don't get confused. Because if you try to put the whole change on one slide, that might be kind of confusing.
Right. Or it's either that, or you could do, you know, just throwing this out, you know, a text-based slide where for the deliverables that you need to call things out on, you can talk about the deliverables and then maybe a status update, and then, you know, what the, you know, if it's delayed or what's going on in terms of the issue, and then a third column, which is the mitigation plan. Might be another.
And then also you're going to have to, you know, keep in mind, like, with any sort of a delay, any team that's affected, right? I mean, either they're going to have to provide you with the mitigation, or you're going to have to solicit the mitigation.
Right.
But no matter what, you're going to have to get the sign off from all of these teams before you can show this. So this is not easy to do, right? Because if you have 4 teams and then you go to a team and you say, hey, team A is going to be late, so when can you get this done by? Or maybe team A and team C are going to be late, and team D is dependent on those 2 teams. So this might take you a long time to put this together.
Yeah. Or either that, or maybe this tool is too simplistic for a very complicated project like that, and we need to be looking at a different tool. This might be the other answer, depending.
Stay at a high level. So we'll take the last question from Hirsch. Go ahead, Hirsch.
Oh, no, I was just trying to tell Dave, like, you know, it is time consuming to begin with, as Ellen also might have experienced. But once you have it formalized, then it is very easy to update daily basis and just report on. But what is helping, if you have the object network diagram, then you know if you are stuck on some place, then which other block you can focus on, can still continue to make the progress. And that's why you should break it down, because then you have the overall you know, bird eye view of the project, what is getting managed through the board. Thanks.
Sounds
Thanks everybody for your thoughts and your feedback.
great conversations, great insight. Thank you, Ellen, for coming here and presenting. Great conversations. And thank you everyone for spending your evening with us. Please mark your calendar for our next event, which is July 11th. And we will host Raj Indulja. He is a DevOps trainer, great coach. You might have heard his name in the testing space and all DevOps and great things that he keeps doing. He'll be talking about AI in test-driven practices. So great topic. Please mark your calendars, July 11th, Thursday. See you all. Thank you. Bye-bye. And thanks, Ellen, once again.
Thank you.
Ellen, thanks. Can you get the slides? That will be helpful.
We'll
Sure.
send it. We'll also have the video recording available.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.